I'm sure there are many questions on the tip of people's tongues, so perhaps I'll open it up straight away to questions. Yes?
That's really amazing, thank you. Just want to ask about costume and how that helps you negotiate the this sort of, I also for Sophie, I would say there is a little bit of sadism in putting actors inside a stadium, and dancers, etc. So I'm just interested in both of you, how does costume enable this negotiation, specifically costume?
In the negotiation
with the virtual and the set specific and the animation.
Yeah, for us it's essential, and we've worked with a dear friend for a long time on it, who we knew from the very, very early cabaret days. She normally makes costumes for giant insects, is her world, so it was very easy to transition to the 1927 world. And the cut of everything, the colours, she'll get loads of animation stills and then design the costumes based on them normally. So it's really integrated, and because we've worked with Sarah on 3 or 4 shows now, it's a really nice, easy realm. Yeah, so their costumes aren't too restrictive, but how they kind of use them on stage is sometimes quite important, and we have a lot of lines cut into the costumes, again, so that they merge with the animated characters. They're hugely important, and quite a lot of the time the costumes, they have to sort of puppeteer them, which is something we're telling them all the time. Puppeteer your props, puppeteer your costumes, be aware of it. Now and then when they first start doing the show, they come in and they've got a crumpled dress and the hat's not on. And again, it's getting them to think as performers, is really think of every single aspect of it. So you're always looking at the set, at the screen, at your costume, at the angles, knowing that it's all part of the same thing.
I guess for our work, the costume bit is the only traditional design bit, because I don't do a set. So I feel like I'm designing the space, but the costume is the visible thing that I've designed. And for me, it's always been really important. And when you're working with the layers of the real and the virtual, you can play quite fun tricks where you have several people dressed as them and they appear in different places magically and sort of silly things like that. But yeah, I mean, we also put our performers through hell. Like we've worked in places with rats running around and kind of dirt everywhere, and it was freezing cold. When we were in the Lido, it was we were working with ballet dancers, so we suddenly discovered this whole world of these people who are like racehorses almost, that they have to be treated very carefully, and they wouldn't go outside if it was too cold, so I had to buy them like thermal underwear, and then it got too hot, so then you have to deal with that. But yeah, I suppose the costume is kind of is really important for us in sort of creating the atmosphere and the story for us, I suppose.
What struck me about your 2 presentations was that even though I suppose in theatrical terms you're from 2 different worlds in terms of performance styles, what was interesting was that this idea of discipline kept coming back time and time again in terms of how you were constructing these versions of reality through, be it costume, be it the performer, be it digital means. Is that idea of discipline absolutely intrinsic to both your performance styles? And if it isn't so specific, do things start to unfurl, if you like?
Yeah, I guess for us we've got, because the audience are going through, it's really complicated. I mean, I feel like a bit of a fraud to be here, because actually it's not very technical what we do. We basically make a film and the audience press go, but the technical thing is working out the kind of cycle of the performance, where they're going to be at any particular moment, how many people you can get to go through, and at what intervals. So it's like clockwork. You have to get people to go through. The performers don't do one thing over and over again for an hour and a half, but they do like a cycle of things. So they don't dive boredom, but so the audience aren't going to see exactly the same thing. At some point they might see something different. They'll see that performer at some point along the route. But if once things start going wrong, if the performer goes to the wrong place or gets out of their cycle, or the audience go through too quickly, it just falls to pieces completely.
Yeah, discipline's a difficult word, isn't it? I don't know why I used it. I'm reading Discipline and Punish at the moment as well, so I'm thinking a lot about it. And so maybe it's not the right word. Really tight choreography is important, and boundaries when we're creating as well, I think. I think sometimes those boundaries can make you so much more creative. It's like working with a small budget sometimes. If you've got a massive budget and you want a crocodile on stage, and you can have a crocodile on stage, it's perhaps not quite as inventive as what you could do with a tenor, or as magical. But yeah, it's funny, that thing of, oh, it could all just go wrong any minute. That side of it is, sometimes I do think it is a bit mad. And we were doing a gig with this guy, Dr. Brown. He's a clown, and he's really loose. Everything he does is loose. And he was saying, and we had a set which was lots of little windows opening and closing. And he said, but what if one of your performers just doesn't quite close the window properly? And I was like, don't talk about that. And whereas he said, how can you work like that? It's so strict, you know. When I'm on stage, it doesn't matter. I can kick that over. I can throw things around. I don't have to set and reset everything. And he found that so restrictive as a notion on stage, that things would be so tight. But
yeah, I always think of 1927's work as something almost cartographic, because you're so specific in terms of the locations that you're trying to get to, both in terms of the narrative, but also in terms of the overall stage image. Wendy, that I suppose speaks to your work as well, Sophie, what you're saying about this idea of mapping a journey for the performers too.
Yeah, but I suppose we have the potential, if it's somewhere in the public are there, you have the potential for incidental things to kind of happen that you weren't planning, that make it magical as well. But yeah, the performers and the people who start them off are really key people. They have to say the right thing, and they have to time it perfectly. They have to understand why that's important as well. Otherwise, yeah, it doesn't work.
Jim?
I've got an observation, if that's all right. We should have obviously subtitled this symposium, Staging Mixed Realities and Negotiating Egos. What you both said. But what I'm interested in, I think it's the whole day really as well, is this idea of a sort of, I think Heine Goebbels calls it a distributed presence. Because it seems to me that that's what your work does, and your work does as well, Suzanne, is that the notion of the presence of the actor, which becomes the sort of central focus, that gets distributed and sort of spread across the space, so that what we're looking at is something which is, we're not focusing on me, look at me, we're focusing on a bigger picture. And and I think I know your work is shallow in terms of its actual space, but I find your work very moving, touching, because it is that bigger picture. We're not locking into one individual performer. We're looking at this distributed presence across the space. Just wanted to say that.
I think it's really, it's a great point, and it's also, as an actor, I think it's a really wonderful challenge, and I've found that most actors do really enjoy it and get into it, and they love the idea that they're also listening to all the music, that they're on rhythm all the time, that they're in the right place. And certainly one of the things I was inspired by was the Grand Guignol, which was the Theatre of Fear and Terror in Paris. And what I loved about reading about the Grand Guignol was that the actors were doing 25 things at once. So they're doing really intense horror acting, but they're also pulling out some fake red blood here that's about to be used, and they've got a sheep's eyeball that they're just about to operate. And I just love this idea of a performer as a technician, that you're doing everything, that you're not just turning up with your script with your lines highlighted and your cappuccino, and lots of actors do that, and that's how, the read-through, it's how so many rehearsal rooms begin. But I found actors really enjoy just getting in and getting their hands dirty and distributing themselves in different ways.
I think it's so interesting as well when you're talking about the actors having to know why they're doing what they're doing, and how, because we get that a bit as well. Like, you might be asking a performer to do a certain thing, and it's like not much to it. Yeah. Actually, when you've got the sound and you've got all the layers, all the other things, there might be something on the screen that they've got to understand how that fits into all the layers of other things that are happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's probably not as extreme as yours, but but it's still part of this jigsaw that makes it happen.
I had one of the songs of 1927 in my head this morning, Red Herring Street. There's something, about your performance style that also stays in the brain.
I know, sorry.
Through the through the repetition, but also the images. And I haven't had quite a nightmare yet.
Tonight.
Somebody else might reveal that in the audience.
Some more questions?
Is there a question? Yes.
So, when you're collaborating, this is something we share in common. There's a lot of amount of negotiation and mediation that has to occur, and that needs compromises. And always the question, at least for me as a practitioner that works collaboratively, is how much compromise is enough compromise? So, what is your personal answer to that? Like, where do you find an example where you thought, okay, that's where I draw the line, and I can't and I have to act as a director that protects the vision of this particular piece or performance, when, let's say, you realize that there isn't a proper engagement with the collaborators or whatnot?
For me, I find it happens all the time, but the idea is most of the time we're all in such a position together that we all kind of come to that conclusion. It's very rare that a performer's saying, no, but I must fling my arms up here. Can you not see that it's better? We all tend to come to the same decisions, and it makes sense. There's a lot of play, a lot of good humour in the rehearsal room, which is essential. No one takes themselves too seriously in there. There's a lot of mucking about, taking the mick out of ourselves, and I've found that essential. Emma Rice talks about always saying yes to actors. Oh, I just love Emma Rice. I just want her. It's just in my life all the time. She's so nice. And I can imagine in a rehearsal room, she's just the best. And she'll always just say yes. She lets the actors come to their own conclusions. When something's wrong, they'll work it out for themselves. Don't say no, just say yes. And I do try that with our team, and I said, no, I'm being Emma Rice today. I'm only saying yes, and they're like, can you just tell me what you think, please? So I try to do the Emma Rice, I just can't. But good humour and just everybody coming to the conclusions and trusting the performers to work it out.
I think as well that we were talking earlier about the process having to be quite a long one.
Yeah.
And I think that the way you set up the relationship from the beginning will help in those negotiations later on. So it's really important. Sometimes you are just playing, but that's a really important way of getting to know each other and getting to understand what everybody's about, so that when those crux moments happen, you can negotiate it with humour and be nice about it and sort of work it out together.
Humour, yes. I think there was a question at the back there, was there? It's past.
We've got 1 minute.
I've got a question for both of you actually, but I was thinking of you because you've developed the technique over quite a long period of time. I was trying to work out how long it was since you said you did your first production, but it's over 20 years.
It's under, but thanks for ageing me, Dick.
Sorry.
For 2007 we've been doing it.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I thought you said in 1997. Okay, fine. Yeah. Sorry, my mistake. But either way, you sort of you've grown up and developed the technique over a relatively long period of time. What if, and this is something it's slightly rhetorical because it's kind of happened to me as well. What if somebody came along like Steve? Is Steve gone now? Anyway, with some new technology and said, well, you don't have to do that, and you don't have to do that, and you don't have to do that. We can just kind of like run this bit of software, and it'll do it all for you. Could you kind of adapt to a completely new way of working that didn't allow your process that you've grown up with to kind of take over your future productions, if it meant working in a different way, but where the technology just did a lot of it for you?
Yeah.
I'm thinking from my point of view, there is software available that will just generate water, smoke, flames, trees, and it's real-time generative 3D visual effects. Yeah. And I don't have to go away and film it, edit it, do the post-production. Yeah. What if your style of, sorry, I was going to say Paul.
Yeah.
It is Paul, isn't it? Yeah. If you could just kind of like request his style of animation, and it would just
bring it on.
It's like
Bring it on.
Could you
More
adapt to that?
time at home.
Yeah.
Just reading books. I mean, the thing is, I think we're so far away from that happening. I mean, even just trying to generate fonts that we can use that are our own Paul's fonts is hard enough. And it's one of the problems, and again, it's about us having to make the technology work for us all the time. And I think one of the charms in what we do is it's utterly flawed, and it's all hand-drawn, and it's really wonky. But if the technology could come along and, it could just recreate exactly what we want like that, be brilliant. I think it'd be great. We'd definitely try it, yeah. Paul's got 3 kids now. I mean, like, how much time would we save? It's really painstaking what we do. It takes bloody ages. If there was a way of shortcutting it, I think we'd hit shortcut. But I just don't think there is. And also, in that process, in that long-winded, painstaking process, and us knowing each other so much, loads of the ideas are generated there. So until we're at the stage where we've got the Roald Dahl machine, where you can just hit the buttons, horror show, 3 actors, until we're there, that's probably a big part of it.
Yeah.
But it's actually, I think it's a very profound question, because it really touches on the creativity and the relationship between technology and making and thinking.
Well, you mentioned the mistakes.
Yes,
and
exactly.
just come out of the process, and that's for me what the software doesn't provide. Most of the things I like are accidents, and then you work on them, but the technology doesn't make those accidents in that serendipitous kind of way.
But might it one day?
Well,
I mean, there's a serendipity app you can get, which sends you off on a serendipitous journey for the day, and I wonder if the tech is getting to the stage where it can really, really recreate Paul Barrett's really unique style of drawing. Will it also be able to bring in all those mistakes?
Or a Sophie jump journey through a particular location.
Yeah, quite, yeah. I mean, it'd save you a lot of time.
I'm really annoyed, actually, but I have to finish this discussion right now. Can we all thank Sophie and Suzanne for 2 wonderful presentations?
Thank you.